My daughter-in-law told the surgeon, "We're not responsible for him. Whatever happens, happens." My own son was standing right beside her and said nothing. I know, because the nurse told me later, quietly, like she was ashamed on their behalf. I had been unconscious for 2 days by then. A ruptured spleen from a fall off the back porch steps. The same steps my son had been promising to fix for 3 years. I lay in that hospital bed in Raleigh, tubes in my arm, a machine breathing half the time for me, and the two people I had given the most to in this world had already written me off before the doctor even knew if I'd make it. They came to the hospital eventually. Not on day 1, not on day 2, on day 4, when my neighbor Evelyn called my son's wife directly and told her the insurance company was asking about next of kin and power of attorney. That's when they showed up. Not for me, for the paperwork. They were wrong about what they'd find. I want you to understand that before I tell you the rest. They walked into that room expecting a broken old man. What they found was a bed with a folded note on the pillow. And when my daughter-in-law read what was written on that paper, she sat down in the visitor's chair and didn't stand up for a long time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got there. Before we go any further, where are you listening from today? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. The fall happened on a Tuesday in March, early morning, still dark out. I'd gone to the back porch to get the bag of birdseed I keep in the covered bin out there. Something I've done every morning since my wife Eleanor passed 6 years ago. She loved those cardinals. After she was gone, I kept feeding them. Felt like keeping a promise. The second step gave way. I'd been meaning to have my son look at it, and he'd been meaning to come. And we'd been dancing that dance for long enough that I stopped asking. I grabbed for the railing, caught nothing, and hit the concrete pad below. I remember the sound more than the pain. A dull, dense crack. Then cold. Then nothing. My neighbor Evelyn found me an hour later when she came over to return a casserole dish. She's 73 and moves slow, but she got to me fast enough. Called 911. Stayed with me until the ambulance came. Held my hand in the driveway while the paramedics worked. Evelyn had known Eleanor. They'd been in the same church quilting group for 20 years. I woke up in Wake Med, 2 days gone from my life. My ribs on the left side felt like gravel. There was a tube in my arm and a bag of something yellow hanging above my head. A young nurse, her name tag said Keisha, was checking my IV when my eyes opened. She looked up, and I could see the relief on her face before she rearranged it into professional calm. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "you're back with us." I tried to say something, and what came out was a sound somewhere between a word and a cough. "Don't push it," she said. "You had surgery. Your spleen. We had to remove part of it." I blinked at the ceiling. The light was too bright and the air smelled the way hospital air always smells, like something clean, trying very hard to cover something that isn't. "My son," I managed. "Is he here?" She adjusted the drip on my IV and didn't answer right away. That pause, 2, maybe 3 seconds, told me everything before she said a word. "We contacted your family," she said carefully. "I'll have the doctor come talk to you. There's a specific kind of hurt that doesn't feel like hurt at first. It feels like confusion, like your brain refuses to file the information in the right drawer and just keeps holding it, turning it over, looking for a different explanation. I'd raised my son Raymond in that house, taught him to drive in the parking lot of a Kmart that doesn't exist anymore, paid for 2 years of community college before he dropped out. Helped him get the job at the distribution warehouse by calling in a favor from a man I'd done roofing work with for 15 years. When he married, I gave them $12,000 as a wedding gift. Money I'd been putting aside in an account Eleanor and I started the year we bought the house. I thought of it as a foundation gift, something to start them right. He had my number. He knew the hospital. He knew I was there. I stared at the ceiling and waited for the doctor. Dr. Osei came in around noon. He was a compact man, unhurried, with close-cut gray at his temples that made him look like someone I could trust. He pulled a chair up to my bedside and sat down like he had time, which I appreciated. Hospital doctors usually look like they're already halfway out the door. He told me the surgery had gone well. that I'd be on restricted activity for 6 to 8 weeks, that I needed to take the recovery seriously. Then he set down the clipboard. "I need to tell you something about the first night," he said. "We needed to reach your emergency contacts. Your son was listed. We called him twice before he picked up." I said, "What did he say?" Dr. Osei looked at the window for a moment. "He asked how long you were likely to be in the hospital. And when I told him you were in surgery and that the situation was serious, he said," he stopped. "I don't want to repeat it exactly. Tell me." He said, "That's between him and God. We can't get there tonight." The monitor beside me beeped its steady beat. Outside in the hallway, a cart rattled past. I counted 4 beeps before I could say anything. "He lives 40 minutes away," I said. "Yes," said Dr. Osei. "I know. I'd had my share of hard things. I lost Eleanor to pancreatic cancer in 14 months, start to finish. I buried my younger brother the year before that. Heart attack at 58. Nobody saw it coming. I'd been through hard things. But there's something about your own child choosing not to come, choosing it consciously, saying the words out loud to a doctor. That's a different kind of wound. It doesn't bleed. It just opens up and stays open. Can you give me a few minutes?" I asked. Dr. Osei stood. "Take all the time you need." He left, and I lay there listening to the monitor, and I thought about the last time I'd seen Raymond. Thanksgiving, 4 months before. His wife, I'll call her what she was, which is trouble in a nice coat, had barely spoken to me all day. Raymond had spent most of the visit looking at his phone. When I brought up the back steps, he'd said he'd get to it. When I mentioned the water heater was making a sound it shouldn't, he'd said he'd look into it. When Eleanor's sister asked how we were all doing, Raymond said fine, and his wife said fine, and I said fine too, because what else do you say at Thanksgiving? I thought about Eleanor. She'd had her doubts about Raymond's wife from the start, not said in a mean way. Just quiet observations she'd share with me at night when we were lying in the dark. "She doesn't ask questions," Eleanor said once. "About anything. Not about you, not about me, not about you, not about me, not about how Raymond grew up. A person who doesn't ask questions isn't interested in the answers." I told Eleanor she was reading too much into it. I wished I could tell her she'd been right. The 4th day was when they came. I was sitting up by then, managing solid food, feeling something in my chest that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite grief, but was somewhere between them. A kind of cold clarity. Keisha had told me quietly, almost in a whisper, what Raymond's wife had said at the front desk on night 1. Not responsible for him. Whatever happens, happens. My son walked into that room, and the first thing I noticed was that he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. He stood at the foot of the bed with his hands in his jacket pockets and said, "Dad, you look better than I expected." I looked at him for a moment. I thought about 45 years of being this man's father. First steps in the kitchen, little league in the rain. The nights I'd sat outside his bedroom door when he was going through something bad at 15 and didn't want to talk, just so he'd know someone was there. "Do I said. His wife stood closer to the door than the bed. She had a phone in her hand, thumb moving. She said, "We've been worried sick," and she said it to the room rather than to me. I let that sit there. Raymond started talking about insurance, about the house, about whether I thought about what happens if something like this occurs again and there's nobody close by. He used the word arrangement 3 times. He meant selling the house. He meant moving me somewhere smaller, somewhere managed, somewhere that would free up the equity. He'd done math on this. I could hear it in how smoothly it came out. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "I'm tired. You should go." He looked surprised. His wife was already moving toward the door. "We'll come back tomorrow," he said. "Don't," I said. He paused. "Dad, I'll call you when I'm ready." They left. The room was quiet again. Keisha came in an hour later to check my vitals and found me sitting up with my eyes open, not reading, not watching the television in the corner, just thinking. "You okay, Mr. Holloway?" she asked. "I need to make a phone call," I said, "to my lawyer. His name was Anthony, and we've been friends since 1987. We'd met on a job site in Durham where we'd both been doing subcontracting work. Him doing electrical, me doing roofing, and discovered we'd grown up 15 miles apart and had somehow never crossed paths. Anthony had gone back to school at 32, gotten his law degree at 37, built a small practice in Cary that handled mostly estate planning and real estate. He was the kind of man who laughed easy and worked hard and didn't waste time, which is exactly what I needed. He picked up on the second ring. Russell. His voice was warm, but I could hear him shift into something more focused when he heard my tone. What happened? I told him. All of it. The fall, the surgery, the 2 days, the nurse's words repeated back to me, Raymond at the foot of the bed, talking about arrangements. I kept my voice level. Anthony let me talk without interrupting, which he was good at. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. You know, I've been telling you to update that will for 2 years, he said. I know. You ready to do it now? That's why I'm calling. He came to the hospital the next day with his assistant and a notary. Because Anthony had already thought through the notary question, had already arranged for a hospital-certified notary to be present. The way a good lawyer thinks about the thing you haven't asked about yet. The paperwork took 90 minutes. I was alert, I was oriented, and the doctor signed off on my capacity. Everything was done right. Everything was airtight. I changed the will in 4 ways. First, the house in Raleigh, Eleanor's house, the one we'd bought the year Raymond was born. The one with the back porch steps I've been waiting for my son to fix. I left to Evelyn, not the whole value of it. I left her the right to live in it for the rest of her life, after which it would transfer to a housing non-profit that helps elderly people in Wake County stay in their homes. I talked to them 2 years before about a donation. This was a different kind of donation. Second, the savings account. Just over $90,000, 30 years of setting aside what I could, I directed to a scholarship fund at the community college Raymond had once attended and left, in Eleanor's name, for students studying to work in healthcare. Third, the tools. A full trailer of roofing equipment, some of it 40 years old, all of it maintained. I left them to a young man named Darius, who'd apprenticed under me for 3 summers in his teens and was now running his own crew. He'd earned them more than anyone. Fourth, to Raymond, I left the watch. My father's watch, a pullover he'd worn every day until the day he died. The one I'd worn to Eleanor's funeral and every Christmas morning since. I left it in a small box with a letter. Anthony sealed the letter himself and kept a copy in his files. The original he put in an envelope, marked with Raymond's name and my handwriting. We agreed it would be delivered to the hospital room if Raymond came back, or mailed, certified if he didn't. He came back on a Thursday. I was already back to leave. I want to tell you what those last hours in the hospital were like, because they matter. Keisha came in early to help me with discharge paperwork and found me at the small desk by the window writing. Not the letter to Raymond, that was already sealed. I was writing something else, notes, really. A list of the things I was grateful for. Eleanor's laugh. The sound of rain on a metal roof. Good coffee. 40 years of work I was proud of. Darius calling me last fall to say he'd just landed his biggest contract. Evelyn holding my hand in the driveway. I wasn't performing peace. I wasn't telling myself a story to feel better. I was making an inventory, the way you do when you come close to losing something and want to account for what remains. Keisha glanced at what I was writing and didn't comment, which was the right call. She just said, "You're going to be all right, Mr. Holloway," and she said it the way you say something you actually believe. The cab was coming at 11. At 10:40, the door to the room swung open and Raymond walked in alone. No wife this time. He was wearing the kind of face I recognized from when he was a boy and had done something he knew was wrong and was working out whether to admit it or explain it away. I was already in my street clothes, my bag on the chair. "You're leaving?" he said. "I am." He stood there. "We need to talk, Dad." "There's an envelope on the bed," I said. "It's got your name on it." He looked at the envelope like it might bite him. He picked it up slowly, opened it the way people open things they're afraid of. I watched him read. It didn't take long. I'd learned from Eleanor to say things plain. The letter said this: "I know what you said to the doctor. I know what your wife said at the front desk. I'm not writing this to punish you or to explain myself. I'm writing it so that you have the truth, which is that I loved you all the way to the end of my ability to love you, and that I spent 40 years trying to give you what my father never gave me, which was stability and presence and a sense that you were worth fighting for. I hope someday you understand what that costs a person. I hope someday you decide it's worth passing on. Your grandfather's watch is yours. He would have wanted you to have it. Treat it better than you treated me." Raymond stood holding the paper for a long time. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. I picked up my bag. "Dad," he said. His voice cracked on the word. I stopped at the door. I didn't turn around. "I'm going home, Raymond," I said. "Evelyn's picking me up. You take care of yourself." I walked out into the hallway, my shoes on the linoleum, the sound of the ward around me, the quiet machines and distant voices, the ordinary hum of a place where people fight to stay alive. I didn't look back at the room. The elevator opened and I stepped in, and for a second I caught my reflection in the polished metal door. An old man with a hospital bracelet still on his wrist, a duffel bag over one shoulder, standing up straight. I looked like myself, maybe more than I had in years. Evelyn was waiting in the pickup loop in her white Buick, heater running. She got out when she saw me and came around to take the bag, which I let her do because my ribs still argued with me on that side. "You look like you got some sleep," she said. "Little bit." She drove the way she does everything. Steady, unhurried, making every green light look like it was planned. We didn't talk much on the way home, which was fine. There's a kind of friendship where silence is just another form of company. When she pulled into the driveway, I saw that the back porch steps had been fixed. New boards, properly supported, painted to match. I stood there looking at them for a moment. "Darius came by 2 days ago," Evelyn said quietly, from behind me. "I called him. He said he'd been meaning to come fix those for a year, ever since you mentioned them. He brought 2 of his guys, and they did it in a morning." I nodded. I couldn't say anything right then. We went inside and she made coffee and we sat at Eleanor's kitchen table, the one we'd bought at an estate sale in 1994, the one that had held 30 years of meals and arguments and homework and holiday dinners. The Cardinals were at the feeder outside the window. There were 3 of them, which I took as a good sign, which I know is not a rational thing, which I don't care about at all. Evelyn wrapped both hands around her mug and said, "Anthony called me. Told me what you did with the house." "I should have talked to you first," I said. "Yes," she said. "You should have. I would have argued with you." "I know. And I would have been wrong," she said. She looked at the table. "Eleanor always said you were the kind of man who saw what things were worth. Not the price. The worth." I didn't say anything for a while. There wasn't anything to say. The sun came through the window the way it does in early spring. That particular slant that Eleanor always said made the kitchen look like it belonged in a painting. The Cardinals rustled at the feeder. The house was quiet and whole and mine. I thought about Raymond, wherever he was right now, whether he was holding that letter or had already put it away, whether the watch would end up in a drawer or whether someday, on some ordinary morning, he'd put it on and something would shift in him. I didn't know. I couldn't make it go any particular way. That part was his. What I knew was this: I was home. My neighbor, who had been kinder to me than my own blood in my worst hour, was sitting at my kitchen table. The man I'd taught roofing to when he was 17 years old had come and fixed the steps so I wouldn't fall again. Whatever I'd lost was real. I'm not going to tell you it wasn't, but what remained was real too. Maybe more real for being chosen, not inherited, not obligated, but chosen. Evelyn chose to come to that hospital. Darius chose to come and fix those steps. Anthony chose to drive to my bedside with a notary on a Thursday morning. None of them had to. That's the thing about a life. You spend so many years building it for people who turn out not to want it. And then, if you're paying attention, you look up and see who's actually there. I reached over and refilled Evelyn's coffee without asking, and she let me, and the morning went on. I keep thinking about those back porch steps. 3 years I asked Raymond to come fix them. 3 years of, "I'll get to it, Dad," and I kept believing him because that's what you do when you love someone. You keep believing them past the point where the evidence says you probably shouldn't. And then one March morning in the dark, the step gave way and I hit the concrete and nearly didn't get back up. That's not a metaphor. That's just what happened. But it is also somehow exactly a metaphor. There's a kind of accounting that life does whether you ask for it to or not. Not punishment, not reward, just consequence. The plain, quiet result of choices made over time. Raymond made his choices. He made them the night the hospital called and he didn't come. He made them again at the foot of my bed when he talked about arrangements and meant selling the house I'd built a life in. He made them every time he took without asking and assumed without earning and left for another day the things that deserved his attention now. Those choices added up. They always do. I didn't cause that accounting. I just stopped standing in the way of it. What I've learned, really learned, the kind that costs something, is that character isn't what you say about yourself. It's what you do when nobody's watching, and nothing's guaranteed. Evelyn didn't come to that driveway because she expected something in return. She came because it was the right thing to do, and she was the kind of person who did right things. Darius didn't fix those steps because of what was in my will. He didn't know anything about my will. He came because I'd once believed in him when he was 17 and barely knew which end of a nail gun to hold, and that had meant something to him. And he was the kind of man who remembered what things meant. That's character. That's the thing you build slow, over years, by making small, decent choices when the stakes seem low. And then one day the stakes are high, and it turns out you already know what you are. I've been thinking too about what it takes to see clearly when you're in pain. There's a temptation when someone hurts you badly to either collapse into it or burn everything down out of rage. I felt both of those pulls in that hospital room. What I tried to do instead was think. Think about what Eleanor would have said. Think about what I actually wanted the rest of my life to look like. Think about who had actually shown up versus who I had been hoping would. That kind of clear-headedness in a hard moment, it doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from practice. From years of solving problems instead of avoiding them. From asking hard questions about yourself before the world forces them on you. And then there's the matter of getting back up. Not just from the concrete. From all of it. The grief of a son who chose money over his father. The loneliness that comes when the family you imagined turns out not to be real. I won't tell you that part didn't hurt, because it did. It still does. But I got up off that hospital bed. I changed the will. I wrote the letter. I walked out the door on my own 2 feet. Not because I wasn't hurting, because I decided that hurting wasn't the same as being finished. The Cardinals were at the feeder when I got home. Evelyn made coffee. Darius had fixed the steps. Sometimes the life you actually have is better than the one you were holding on to. You just have to let go of the wrong things long enough to see it.